podcast, he just sounded so confused.
Way more women involved in gymnastics than men.
Oh, absolutely. But those are the sports that get the less attention, right?
Gymnastics
have
gets
less,
huge amounts of
it sure does. It's one of the rare examples of like.
And you couldn't find any topic that Joe would agree with him on. And it's so funny because he'd start talking about something. He's like, you'd have to be an idiot to believe this. And Joe's like, well, actually, I believe that. And I think you're completely wrong about this. Like, at one point, they're talking about that amputee runner who killed his girlfriend, Oscar Pistorius. And Adam's like, can you believe people actually think that his prosthetic leg helped him in any way? And Joe's like, well, I think it did.
And people were saying about this guy that his prosthetic gave him an advantage. Now, first of all, that's true because he doesn't have muscles. Muscles
But
are
I
the
actually
first
think
thing
it does give you an advantage. I mean, I think mechanically it does because they're springs. Essentially, the way his leg works with those things.
Hold on, that's not an advantage because how mechanics work, right? Is that a spring, you put energy into it and you get a little bit less energy out, right? So because that's the laws of thermodynamics, right? You get more out than you put in.
But at least this is a subject where he doesn't need to talk about consulting one of his trans experts again. But, you know, obviously the trans stuff is going to be the most divisive topic. That's where they had the most disagreements. And then at the end of the episode, it's so funny. He started talking about the moon landing because I guess on his TV show, he did a whole episode on that about how, like, there's no way it could have been faked. And he starts giving reasons why. And immediately Joe's like, well, that's one of the reasons why people say it's fake. And he's like, I used to be a total denier. I thought for sure it was fake. And I'm just like, oh man, I shouldn't have brought this up because they already had so many disagreements. And obviously it was not going well for Adam. So by the end of this, I think he's just defeated.
Oh, this is one of my favorite videos we ever did. So, you know, it's about how the moon landing, the thesis is the moon landing could not have been faked. It would have been harder to fake the moon landing than it would have been to actually go to the moon because the technology to fake it did not exist. Like when we talked to a forensic film guy and he walked us through it, he's like, look, the shadows are parallel, right? They're not diverging. You know, a close light source, the shadows would diverge, right?
So wait a minute, you know that's like one of the big arguments for the moon hoax is that the shadows intersect, the shadows indicate multiple light sources?
Well, that is because
that's one of the main arguments.
That is I believe that's reflected light. Okay, I'm getting past my memory of the segment.
Yeah, dude, I used to be a full-on moon hoaxer. I fully believed we never went to the moon.
I shouldn't have brought this up.
I watched the documentary that was on Fox TV while I was on news radio.
Yeah, so they had a lot of disagreements throughout the podcast, but it never really got heated at all. Joe had a lot of patience with this guy. Like the most annoyed Joe would get would be when Adam would say something ridiculous, and then Joe would be like, what are you saying, dude? Let me explain to you how that makes no sense.
And most of the games that we've constructed are actually sort of biased towards a male type of body, right?
That sounds ridiculous. First of all, the reason why.
So then, like I said, a few years after this, Adam went on Hassan's live stream, and Hassan brought up the podcast, and they started talking about it.
I was excited to do this interview because at the time, Joe was not so directly associated with like the far right. Like he hadn't totally made that turn yet. All right, I mean, I'll go to bat for what I think is right here as best I can. But you know, when the dude is like locked and loaded with like, you know, Jamie pull that up shit of whatever pseudoscience he wants to bring up, it wasn't the best position to be in. And you know, so that's my biggest bummer about it was like, he was not really into the idea of having like an honest. He turned it immediately into a boxing match, and I wanted to have a conversation. So all the backlash was like, oh, Rogan owned you. He wanted to debate against you. I was like, I thought I was having a conversation. Like, yeah. I thought I went on to just like talk about my show and he turned it into a fist fight, which that's what I don't like about it.
Yeah, so maybe he really just didn't know what the podcast was like, or he's just coping. You know, I think it's just a combination of both. But I think if he knew what the podcast was like, he probably wouldn't have gone on there. And also he's saying Joe went far right afterwards, but Joe had already been associating with a lot of people on the far right. I think maybe he toned it down a little bit. Like before Adam was on there, he already had on Steven Crowder a bunch of times, Milo Yiannopoulos, Alex Jones, and Stefan Molyneux, like all those kinds of people. And also if you're familiar with Joe's podcast at all, you should have a pretty good idea of what he thinks about trans people competing in women's sports and kids transitioning at a young age and all that stuff. And it's funny, Adam's like, I thought I was just gonna go on there and talk about my TV show, which they did talk about quite a bit, and that still led to arguments. Like at the beginning of the podcast, Adam brought up an episode from a show where they talk about alphas and betas, and he said that's not a real thing and women aren't attracted to like one over the other. And of course Joe completely disagreed with that. But again, the argument never really got that intense. It's not like they're yelling at each other or anything. But of course Adam, he describes it as a boxing match, and he makes it sound like it's this serious debate that he didn't want to get into at all. Even though if he didn't want to get into an argument, he probably shouldn't have gone into his theories about sports. I mean, Joe Rogan's the last person you want to bring that stuff up to, especially if you barely even thought it through. So I don't know why he went into that, and I don't know how he expected Joe to just let that slide and not question it at all. And then once he brought it up, he couldn't really go into it because he hasn't consulted with the experts yet. So I mean, this whole thing was just hilarious. But let me know what you guys think about it down in the comments, and then make sure you go check out my Patreon account. I have a bunch of videos up there, probably over 20 at this point. Most of them are pretty long, and I just posted one about Kramer's infamous meltdown at the Laugh Factory. That's a wild story, so make sure you go check that out. I'll put the link in the description, and then make sure you hit the like button here, hit the subscribe button, and I'll catch you at the next video.
To the public. They showed off all the new gun models apart from the AK, which are still being worked on. They showed the new recoil system, weapon keys, the new attachment system. You can now throw stuff by pressing T, the new models for the medical items as well as some others, the new radio model, the new Tesla game model in effect, new changes to the RA, and a new culling system. It was a bombshell of information, but it wasn't even the best part. Because on the same day, at around 2 p.m. Eastern time, they announced that the 11.0 beta was officially on the way for Patreon supporters tier 4 now. And people fucking bought this shit in droves. Northwood was making bank over $10,000 at one point with this one singular update they were making. However, it wasn't just because of the gun update. No, because on July 24th, they revealed the true major change to the update, and that was the 173 rework. It got a new model, new abilities, new gameplay mechanics. It was insane, and it was a massive success for the game. Content creators who were making videos on this update were blowing up massively over this. This, of course, even out further since during this time YouTube Shorts was added to the platform. It was insane. The Parabellum update changed everything, and it was a massive success for Northwood. But with this came at a cost, and that was the community. While the community was definitely thriving over the update, Parabellum itself was seeming to try and get attention of the competitive side of gaming. Now, I already said that before the update there was a little surge in competitive players, but overall didn't have a massive effect towards the game and the community. However, this update alone caused the beginning of the complete downfall of SL's community. This update saw a massive surge of competitive players come to the game for the first time, would have a massive effect towards the community. It was insane the shift the community took. This game, it felt completely different playing, not only because, well, the game was completely different with Parabellum, but with the community as well being a lot more competitive. This also caused a lot of more casual players who were around during the old days starting to move on as they weren't having fun with the new vibe of the game and the community. I was honestly fine with the new shift. I still had a lot of fun on SL, but the signs were obviously starting to show. At the rate it was going, it was only time until the community completely fell apart. and it completely fell apart in 2022. 2022 was just the worst year FSL's run yet. It was a disaster almost the whole way through up until Mimicry, not just for the game, but really for the community. The community just fell apart entirely. What was left of the 2019 through 2020 community was completely shattered now. The community became a lot more toxic, a lot more divided, more angry at each other. It was a shit show from start to finish. And I mean, the world in general has just gone a lot more divided and shit now. However, the worst part of it all, though, wasn't even the community's fault. Oh boy, here we go. So I was a little bit mixed on if I even wanted to talk about this in the first place, because it is truly fucked up how these community servers crumbled. But I do think these matter in the community's downfall, so here goes nothing. So like I said, 2022 fucking sucked for itself. It was a shit show up until Mimicry, but what the community couldn't undo or fix in any way was two major shutdowns of community servers that caused the community's hearts to be shattered. And those were Cognity's Playground and Unlimited SCP. Okay, let's start with Unlimited. Unlimited SCP was, before it shut down last year, perhaps the biggest server on SL, with right behind them being Dr. Bright's and King's Playground. This server was a lot of people's go-to when first starting. This was Samarded's main server, and we all know how big it was during 2020 through 2021. It has a lot of plugins that kept the game fun, and overall, Unlimited was perhaps the server to go to. Now, I personally never got into Unlimited. The main server I got into when I started, and I'm sure many other people's first server, was Dr. Bright's, but when I did play it, I definitely saw why the server was a lot of people's favorite during its run. But then came the shutdown, and it really sucked how it happened. It was just nothing that anyone could fix. The staff team kind of fucked themselves when they did this. And also, I should probably mention, I don't know that much about what happened, I just know how it all went down. But basically, the former owner stepped down, a new owner was brought in, and when the staff team found out his secret, he shut down the server. And that so imminent secret was, the new Unlimited owner was a yeah. Oh, what a world we live in. But what's even worse is the Cogni shutdown. And oh boy, that they really screw up in a bad way. Cogni's was one of my main go-tos whenever I started branching out towards other servers. This server brought a lot of that fun back I was missing. It was one of the only communities that were more casual than others. They wanted to have fun with their server, and a lot of the main content creators at the time were mainly streaming on Cogni's Playground. Then, after the Parabellum update release, Northwood then added primitives, which could basically make custom objects in your servers. Cogni's then used this and made their own Surface Zone update, and it was quite successful. However, using primitives will later come back to haunt them. Otherwise, the server continued on into 2022, and just like the community itself at the time, Cogni's community started to slowly crash. Another problem, though, was with the primitives, which did come back to haunt them since, well, it just kept adding more primitive stuff into their server. And with this caused severe frame rate issues. The frames were abysmal for the most part, and Cogni, who by the way is a server owner and is a former Northwood staff, decided to not remove any of the primitives on the server, but to instead drop the player size count down from 40 to 25. Fucking hell. This only did not fix the frame issues, but also meant that, well, less people would be able to join, so it'd just be less fun and chaotic. But of course, the worst was yet to come, because now we get to the shutdown itself. It's July 16th. It starts off normal, but then on Discord you hear the iconic notification sound. You go to see what it is, and yeah. So for context, before the shutdown happened, throughout the previous few days, the staff team for Cogs was starting to leave in droves. And it was pretty unclear at first, until July 16th, when this bombshell was revealed on Cognity's Discord and eventually on Wyatt's Discord. And the reason for it was because, and before I say this, if you don't want to feel uncomfortable after me saying it, then you can skip this time mark here. But the reason was, the owner of the server, Cognity, got into a Snapchat call with a underage staff, and then goes on to send him or her NSFW pics of femboys and ask them to rate it. Once this was announced on the Cognity's Discord server, Cognity quickly shut down the server, the Discord, and left the Northwood staff. After it all, Wyatt then talked to him about it, and he had this to say. I know you posted this, but I'd just like to explain. I have a multi-personality disorder, and sometimes I'm genuinely not in control. I've already booked therapy sessions to get this under control. It used to be a rare occasion before I started the host SL, Discord, etc. But it got really bad really quickly with all the stress and everything. I'll understand if you hate me or something, but I just wanted to say this. I've kept it private to many, many people. Only a few staff know of my condition and know the extent of my freakouts, but I will get better. So yeah, all of this was just sad to watch. Cognity's was one of the most fun servers with a lot of plugins to keep the game exciting, and to see this in Unlimited go down in basically the exact same way just shows how fucked the world has become in the community. There are so many people out there that just do bad shit and ruin people's lives for years, and it sucks to see. So yeah, overall, these shutdowns in 2022 shattered their communities and left quite a hole for some time, something that we're still trying to rebuild to this very day. Overall, the SL community has completely shattered, been torn apart these past few years, and it hasn't seemed to get any better now in the modern day. And to answer the question at the start of what caused the massive shift and eventual downfall of the community, although there's a lot of reasons as to why, I think Parabellum is what changed it all. It was the beginning of the end from that moment forward, and with the world just getting worse, it kind of is what caused all the mess though in the first place. I don't blame the competitive players exactly for it, or Northwood fully. It can just be a dark place at times, and bad people just started to swarm SL in droves last year, causing chaos throughout. And it obviously didn't help that two of the biggest community servers shut down the same year. It just made things worse, and just shows how bad some people can be in this world sometimes. Although the community has crumbled though, I will say, I think we're starting to get better just a little bit. It's still bad, but it's starting to change in a good way, and if this continues, maybe SL's community can reach the peak that it once hit, although it isn't likely this will happen. So in short, SCPSL's community has taken a massive shift in the past few years, from a fun, loving, thriving community to a more competitive, but also more toxic and just overrun by some shitty people. And if we want to rebuild SL to its peak, we might as well start with rebuilding the community. That's if we even can.